At the time, I had no idea how close I'd come to dying. The rain was belting on the windscreen of my Subaru Impreza as I flew along the rural highway, with flume blaring through my mediocre speakers. The sun would have been very low in the sky, if not for the thick cloud that completely obscured it. I was probably going too fast, thinking back to it. The water was pooling on the uneven surface of the road, and I could feel each puddle tugging at my tires as I flew along. I never even saw the Commodore Ute start to pull out from a T-intersection 50 meters ahead, and I didn't react at all. Maybe the wet road caused his wheels to skid as he tried to take off, preventing him from entering my lane. Maybe he looked up and saw my aftermarket rally-style lights bearing down on him at the last second. Regardless of why, we didn't crash. The side of my Subaru rocketed past his front bumper at 130 k's an hour, with maybe 1 inch separating us. 1 inch. That meant the difference between me continuing on my way and being flung off to the side of the road in a cataclysmic accident that would no doubt have left me dead. The strange thing is, I had no idea that it had happened until that night, when I had the most realistic dream of my entire life. It was so impossibly close to being the end of it all. Close enough that I really reconsidered my driving habits. It was too close, though, for the Whispering Man. Too close to him getting what he felt he deserved. I woke up crying the first time he showed it to me. The dream was frighteningly real. Every aspect of my car was exactly as it was in real life. It was like an out-of-body experience of sorts. Me viewing my car tearing along the road from the outside. I could see myself in the driver's seat, staring blankly out of my rain-obscured windshield. I remember wondering why I was watching myself drive this featureless piece of road, until I saw the ute arrive at the intersection. In slow motion, I watched as the ute driver went to pull out onto the road, right in front of my speeding Impreza. I saw his vehicle hesitate, either a slight loss of traction or the driver reducing the throttle, providing that measly 1 inch of space between life and death. Two things then happened at once, like two videos being played side by side almost. In one, my Impreza kept speeding along the road, the driver blissfully unaware of the near accident. In the other, the ute moved another inch, the bumper catching under my left rear guard. At 130 k's an hour, my car skewed unrecoverably to the left. I applied full right steering in a vain attempt to keep my car on the road, but I couldn't stop my front right tire from digging into the soft shoulder off the road, collapsing the steering rack and suspension. My car lifted fully off the ground, fragments of my shattered subframe fanning out in all directions. I braced myself uselessly against the B-pillar and I closed my eyes. Still traveling at around 100 k's an hour, the car plowed into the ground roof first, collapsing like a tin can. The windows all blew out and the thin sheet metal was physically torn from the chassis by the rough ground. I lost sight of myself, but I was confident that I had died in that enormous initial impact. The Impreza rolled another 3 times before coming to a rest, inverted and completely unrecognizable. I really didn't want to look in the cabin, but my viewing position approached the car regardless. The smell was what I noticed first. A hideous combination of hydraulic fluid, petrol, blood. I didn't even think you could smell things in a dream, but this odor was horrific enough that I almost threw up. My body was held in place by the dashboard and the steering wheel, with about 3 inches between the wheel and my seat. All my ribs were obviously crushed, and bloody pulp was drooling from my mouth. My head was twisted at an angle that meant my neck was shattered, and the right side of my face was just gone. A grotesque combination of tendons and skin held cracked pieces of my skull in mid-air, and a small amount of my brain seemed to be on what was left of the B-pillar. My right arm was 50 meters behind the car, where it first rolled. The dream forced me to stare at the monstrosity that I had become for what felt like an eternity before it allowed me to exit the cabin. As I stood up next to the mangled wreck, I noticed that someone else was standing nearby, observing. It was a man, at least I guessed it was, dressed head to toe in a black robe. I could just make out a large amulet of sorts hanging around his neck, but there was no face. He just stood there, motionless, as I stared back at him. What the hell did he want? I could faintly hear words too, as if he were trying to talk to me incredibly softly. I strained to make it out, but I woke with a start, crying and physically sick. I knew right then that the near crash had really happened. It was just far too real to be a figment of my imagination. I could have sworn too that just for a second after I woke up, I could still hear the whispering. For the next 3 weeks, I was shown that same horrific dream every night. It was always exactly the same, and there was nothing I could do to stop myself spending an age staring at my own hideously mangled corpse. I tried with all my might to move anywhere but where the dream took me, but to no avail. It was pointless. It was as if some omnipotent force was drawing me along, forcing me to see what I had almost become. I didn't know if it was trying to teach me a lesson. The man in the cape, that is. He never said anything intelligible. Every night, he simply stood there on the side of the road, observing my eviscerated car. I yelled at him, screamed at him even, trying to understand why he was subjecting me to this horror. But he never reacted. Every single night I woke crying, and every night I swore I could hear the unintelligible whispering for a second longer. Obviously, I tried everything I could to get rid of these terrible dreams, I drank myself into a stupor, only to find myself perfectly conscious as I was shown my corpse in that wreckage. I took pills to prevent me from sleeping, but when I eventually gave in to the demands of rest, I was at that crash site once more. I even went to see a psychologist, and I got the whole thing off my chest in some desperate attempt to make the robed figure and my mangled corpse leave me alone. To my genuine surprise, it was actually the psychologist who first mentioned a whispering man. I had just got to explain the figure that stood by the road when he interjected with, "Was the figure whispering to you?" I must have looked at him with an incredulous expression because he went on to explain, in limited detail of course, that a previous patient had complained of similar recurring nightmares showing their own death. They had described a hooded figure in their dreams too, one that stood near the site of their death and whispered unintelligible words at them. The psychologist had suggested that it might be a subconscious representation of death, and encouragingly continued that the patient in question stopped needing to see him a few weeks after starting on some heavier medication. I was relieved to hear that there was medication that could apparently rid me of my current ailment, but I found the similarities between my hooded figure and the other patients to be concerning. I had never really actively imagined what death would look like, but if I had to, I would go for a skeleton on a black steed, carrying his stereotypical scythe. How could someone else, who I presume I'd never met, imagine that same hooded figure with the same amulet? I don't know how I managed to even get to sleep that night, but when I did, it was beautiful, dreamless sleep for the first time in nearly a month. I woke up at dawn, thinking about how wonderful it was to not dream, until I heard it. Not trailing off like normal when I woke up, but starting. The whispering. My blood ran cold as I realized the noise was not stopping like usual. I could still hear it. Extremely faint, but there. I wondered how I could possibly hear the noise in my waking life. The hooded figure was only in my dreams, wasn't it? I looked out my bedroom window, half expecting to see the brooding, cloaked figure motionless in my front yard, but there was nothing. The noise trailed off, which surprisingly gave me little comfort. I had this horrible, creeping feeling that whatever it was that had been manifesting in my dream was now not a figment of my imagination at all. The next few days passed in much the same way. Each day I heard the whispering noise for slightly longer, and the volume was slightly higher. I can't really explain it, but it was as if the noise existed apart from all other noise. Even with a background full of cars and people, I could hear that whispering. It was as if it was being spoken directly into my ear, while being too indistinct for me to hear what the words actually were. Occasionally, I would catch a single word that seemed to be in English, but I could never grasp any meaning. I couldn't tell if it was trying to communicate with me, or if it was, why. I was genuinely starting to wonder if I was losing my mind due to these heavy drugs I was on. So I decided I would try to do a little bit of digging into whether anybody else had experienced acute psychosis as a side effect of what I was taking. There were plenty of reports of the usual psychotic episodes, but nothing that really sounded like what I was suffering from. I tried searching for hooded figure and whispering man on the internet, but nothing of any substance ever came up. I was close to giving up when something slowly dawned on me. I don't know where the idea came from, but like a terrible seed, it blossomed in the back of my mind. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I hesitated before typing Grim Reaper. I bit my lip as I scrolled through the results. Mostly cliche biblical interpretations of a skeleton riding a dark horse. Finally, I came across something more disturbing, titled The Reaper. It was an article of some sort on a paranormal website. My heart jumped into my mouth as I saw the artist's impression of this Reaper. A hooded figure with no face and a large amulet around his neck. My pulse quickened, and I wanted to do anything but keep reading. But out of sheer morbid fascination, I couldn't tear my eyes from the article. It was translated from French, so some sections made little sense, but from what I gathered, the first reports of this Reaper were from rural France in the early 1800s. Apparently, a husband and wife were set to be executed for the murder of their young children. But much to the disgust of the townspeople, they were spared at the last minute by what most believed to be a false alibi. Enraged at this lack of justice, a few people from the town who had dabbled in the occult arts set about finding a spell or a curse to bring the duo to justice. Nobody knows whether any spell was performed or not, but there are records to suggest that 2 small bodies were exhumed and burned, and that the alleged murderers went insane and were exiled from the village. In the years that followed, though, a few people who narrowly escaped serious accidents reported seeing a figure following them everywhere in the weeks following their near miss. They also claimed to have been subjected to horrific dreams where they witnessed their own deaths, which subsequently seemed to drive many insane. I swallowed hard at this point. This was all too real. Everything that was being described by this webpage had actually happened to me, and at least one other person that I was aware of. It wasn't possible, was it? The article finished off by saying that years later, one of the townspeople confessed to performing an occult ritual to summon an entity called a Reaper, tasked with claiming the souls of the 2 murderers. The legend goes that the Reaper was unsatisfied with claiming only those he was instructed to, and set about claiming the souls of any person he felt should not have avoided death. An image of my ruined Impreza flashed before my eyes, and I felt sick to the stomach. According to the article, the claiming of someone's soul was not meant to kill them, but rather leave them a shell of who they used to be. still capable of living and existing in society, but often institutionalized due to their fevered ranting and vacant expressions. Their soul, on the other hand, was said to spend eternity in the amulet around the figure's neck, and can be heard by anyone that the hooded figure approaches. The article concluded, "He who the Reaper seeks to claim will know true fear." I slammed the laptop closed. My heart rate at an all-time high. This was all too much. The thing that I had been seeing in my nightmares was not a figment of my imagination at all, but an entity convinced that I had cheated death. The whispering that I had been hearing was not the entity, but the souls of those he had claimed previously. What were they saying? Were they trying to warn me? Tell me to run? Were they ranting feverishly, like the empty shells of people they left behind? As the dark shape entered the room behind me, I froze where I sat. I could hear exactly what those souls were saying. An almost infinite number of distinctly individual voices. And they weren't whispering warnings to me. They were screaming.